Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Team Forbidden's YouTube page again. It is Andrew the Collector here with part 2 of our top 5 deck trilogy that we're doing for the new format post Cyberstorm Access. So today we are going to be talking about the rogue decks. These are the decks that don't necessarily have the highest representation, but still have the means to be competitive and go toe-to-toe with some of the top meta decks. So we're going to jump into number 5. Number 5, I'm going to go with Drytron. Drytron last, the format before Kashtira came into the format, they pretty much disappeared off the face of the earth, mainly because of Bysteals. Bysteals were the deck's biggest weakness because they can just spot banish out their resources from the graveyard, which Drytron sometimes relies on. But the last format, the Bysteals kind of saw a less competitive use since, they weren't as relevant. So Drytron was starting to make a comeback. But nowadays, Bysteals aren't really played as much as they used to, so Drytron has a much bigger advantage than they did in previous formats. But I'm putting it at number 5 just because we don't know. It still hasn't had the representation that we hoped it would, or at least other players hoped they would. But depend on what they hit on the ban list, plus how the format shapes once Cyberstorm Access officially settles in, that'll depend on where they place in the format. Now for number 4, I'm going to go with Sword Soul. Sword Soul, it's kind of a glass cannon almost, or a glass cannon-ish type deck. Very linear, very simple, but it can still do some stuff. They really haven't had a lot of flashy-esque cards recently. But the thing that makes them so good is that they have access to such a good extra deck in the terms of their own Sword Soul Synchros, Baron de Fleur, a bunch of Worm Synchros, and Tenyi Synchros too. Plus the Yang Zing Synchros. They have access to a pretty good extra deck toolbox, plus they're really consistent with their Synchro Summons. And on top of it, the thing reason why I put them on this list is because they got a new support card, more generic support card obviously, in the terms of the Apple Dragon Tuner, in which you can special summon it, synchro off with it, and then banish it from the graveyard to special summon a level 2 token, which you can either use as a tuner or a non-tuner, depending on what you go with. So yeah, Sword Soul I think is going to be a good contender, at least for the rogue category. Now number 3, I'm going to go with the Mana Dome. The reason why I didn't put this in the top 5 meta decks is because they don't have all their support yet. Once the next set comes out in the next few months, that deck is probably going to be the new number 1. Because, my god, I face that deck online a lot at its full power. It's basically a synchro spam negate break my board deck. You know how we all love those decks, right? So be sure to stock up on your raw sphere modes, your lava golems, your kaijus, your dark ruler no mores, because you're going to need those. But as of now, they're only going to be used as variants, not necessarily a one singular deck. Because you can use them with Scare Claws, you can use them with tier elements, you can make them pure. But right now, it's a little unsure on how they're going to contend until they get their support in the next set. So I'm going to go right in the middle of the Rogue deck, which I think is a pretty good place for them. Now number 2, you're going to be surprised about this, but it's going to be super heavy. It's kind of the same thing as the Mana Dome. And purely as combined, because the thing about super heavies is that they're really good when they get going. And I'm not talking pure, I'm talking about the Earthbog variants, basically. They're really good when they get going, but they have a lot of pitfalls. They're susceptible to floodgates. If they don't go first and you don't drone lockbird them, or if you don't hit them in the right spot with a good Ash Blossom or whatever, they kind of don't have a backup plan, almost, because super heavies rely on you not having spell and trap cards in your deck. So it's literally a monster heavy central deck. So they're very weak and susceptible to spell and traps, especially traps and trap-based decks like Labyrinth or Trap Tricks, since they don't have, back row removal. But that's where they can do it in the side, where they can have Denko Sekka, they can have Jinzo, and they can even run Spell Canceller. But those aren't really as reliable, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to put it in number 2 because I think that's a very fair place to put it. And for my number 1 rogue deck, it's going to be my baby Flunderies. Flunderies got probably one of the best support cards that they can get in the terms of Morganite. Morganite is basically a card that says you can't activate hand traps, but for the rest of the duel, you can draw 2 cards during your main phase, during your draw phase, and you can do 2 normal summons. What more can you ask for with Flunderies? Because the one thing that was really weak for Flunderies is that if you stop them for their first normal summon, you know, their turn will pretty much end. Sure, they had the field spell, but you didn't always have access to that. With 3 Morganite, you basically have access to 3 of the field spell effects. You know, it's completely bonkers. And the deck is really cheap, too. And Morganite, surprisingly, is only a $2 super as of right now. So, yeah, really good deck, and probably the number 1 number 1 rogue deck that I can think. And the tops, and it's probably going to be placed as number 6 for the top meta decks. It has a really good chance, I believe. And that's going to do it for this video for the top 5 rogue decks. Stay tuned for our next video, which is going to be the top 5 budget decks, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.